So World War III, Nostradamus, the prophecies of Mabus, the Third Antichrist. I just want to read over some of the quatrains that Nostradamus wrote about the particular Third Antichrist, Mabus, who's identified with. Some people have believed Mabus to be Saddam Hussein, some believed it to be Obama, some believed it to be Mahmoud Abbas. I don't believe it was any of them. I don't believe he's came yet. Maybe he's alive right now. I don't know. I don't even know if we can take every single thing at face value that Nostradamus wrote. A lot of what he wrote has came true. And there's some things he wrote that hasn't. But on his predictions of the world wars and Antichrist, they seem to be pretty close. But anyways, I just want to read over the quatrains. And the quatrains that deal specifically with just that topic. And also give kind of 3 key astrological events or times that could possibly be times of the so-called running of the comet, which Nostradamus predicts that a great comet, will run before the terrible slaughter, or right before the Antichrist's death, supposedly. But let me read some of the verses here, and I'll go over, and I want to show you a list of timetables that could possibly be astrologically around the time period, so to say. We'll see. Anyways, one of the quatrains here: Mabus soon dies, and there is a terrible slaughter of people and animals. There is thirst, hunger, famine when the comet is seen. Or another interpretation of it goes: Mabus will soon die, then will come a horrible undoing of people and animals. And at once we'll see vengeance, 100 hands, or powers, thirst, famine when the comet will pass. Okay, and here we have another. In that year, Saturn and Mars are equally fiery. The air is very dry. There's a long meteor. Of people and beasts shall be a horrible destruction. Blood, thirst, famine, when the comet shall run. And also something here that might be some of importance as the maybe the very near future of what's going on now, perhaps, so to say. Out of the country of Greater Arabia shall be born a strong master of Mohammedan law. This king will enter Europe wearing a blue turban. He is the one that shall cause the infernal gods of Hannibal to live again. He will be the terror of mankind. Never more horror. And if we remember, Hannibal was probably one of the greatest military strategists of all time, invading Europe and Rome especially with elephants and whatnot, and killing people brutally. Mabus will soon die, then will come a horrible undoing of people and animals. At once one will see vengeance, 100 hands, thirst, famine, when the comet will pass. Okay. The Third Antichrist, very soon annihilated. 25 years his bloody war will last. The heretics are dead. Captives exiled. Blood-soaked human bodies in a red and icy hell covering the earth. And another. After that, the Antichrist will be the infernal prince, again, for the third and last time. All the kingdoms of Christianity, and even those of the infidels, will tremble for the space of 25 years. So many evils should be committed by means of Satan, the infernal prince, that almost the entire world will be found undone and desolate. Excuse me. These are the verses pretty much relating to the prophecy of Mabus and the Third Antichrist, and it really isn't clear whether Mabus is the Third Antichrist or if he's associated with the Antichrist. But we do know that somebody named Mabus, well, probably not going to be directly named Mabus, but somebody under the code name of Mabus will pretty much die when the comet is seen, and that's basically going to set off like a huge conflict, I'm guessing, and basically involving a lot of countries and nations. Here we have the phrase here, 100 hands, you know, or powers, you know, a lot of people, a lot of nations getting into a conflict. It keeps getting bigger and bigger. That and the war will last 25 years. Not only that, it's probably going to be somebody out of the, I mean, how it says the greater Arabian area. Some people have speculated Persia, you know, Iran, out of that area, you know, will come a strong master of the Mohammedan law. So obviously it's going to be somebody that's affiliated in some way, somehow, with the Muslim religion or ideology. You know, probably not a true Muslim at heart, you know, I mean, bringing as far as being peaceful and anyways, I'm not going to go off about that, but it's somebody from that region, and it will be very strong and have a lot of power. And it could almost be reminiscent of the biblical prophecy of Ezekiel 38, having to do with the Gog and Magog and you know, descending upon the Middle East, but obviously that's probably where it's going to be. And then we also have a key word here of this king is going to enter into Europe. So there's going to be a Muslim invasion of Europe, which we can kind of maybe see that happening now with the Muslim migration, you know. Maybe, you know, 90% of the people are good coming in. Maybe there's 10% who are sowing the seeds for a future war or so. Not totally sure, but I want to go over 3 important astrological dates as to where we can see from what Nostradamus has written about Saturn and Mars being equally fiery as to be the time that will happen when the comet will pass. So I'll show you a look at that here and see what we see. Okay, so the first of the upcoming 3 possible dates of Saturn and Mars being equally fiery is going to come in April of 2016, but I think this is kind of highly unlikely that this will be anything significant. For one, because we really don't know if we're going to have a comet of any notoriety pass at this time. I kind of doubt it, but Saturn and Mars will be equally fiery. Just since of recently, Saturn has moved into the sign of Sagittarius. It goes through each sign takes 3 years for Saturn to complete a cycle through each sign. It's just been in Scorpio for the last 3 years, so as of recently it's moved into Sagittarius. Now, here we have right here, in April, okay, Saturn, these are going to be the closest points to come in April of 2016. Here we have Saturn, which is going to be at 16 degrees of Sagittarius. And Mars, the closest it's going to come to Sagittarius for a while, is going to be right here at 9 degrees of Sagittarius. And you see they got about an 8 degrees difference there. Not really significant, but that's the closest they're going to come for a while, because Mars is going to retrograde and actually move back through the zodiac over the course of a couple of months, and is not even going to come back to being anywhere near Saturn until August of 2016, which might be a little more significant. Okay, so here we have our initial second date of importance as to Saturn and Mars being equally fiery. In the year 2016, in late August, Saturn and Mars are going to come conjunct right here in 9 degrees of Sagittarius. Here's Saturn, excuse me, Mars, and here's Saturn. By this time, Saturn is retrograded to 9 degrees, and Mars, which was retrograding, has already been coming back to its original position where it was even last time in April, to 9 degrees is where they're both meeting up in the sign of Sagittarius, being equally fiery. But as if to that's the actual date to when the as to when the war will officially be set off, I can't really say for sure. But it is a point of Saturn and Mars being equally fiery, and the only thing we can really go by Nostradamus' writings is that it will be a Muslim invasion of Europe, you know, by a Mohammedan prince, Already we see a lot of Muslim migrants coming into Europe, which could be a sign, maybe, maybe not. We see, definitely see tensions, a lot more tensions in Europe and the Middle East, you know, especially from, you know, many Muslim nations, and even, you know, the US and Russia involved, and Syria. I mean, it's just, who knows. But it'll also be important to look for a comet to be passing at that time, and it's most likely going to be a major comet, not just some rinky-dink comet that a few people in a village will see, but probably a major comet, which will lead me to my next date here. Okay, so our next potential date of Saturn and Mars being equally fiery comes 12 years later, well, around about 12 years later, in the year 2026. And this is in the month of April, when Saturn and Mars finally meet up again in a fiery sign, which is Aries, which is pretty much the most fiery of the fiery signs. Aries is, you know, known as the god of war, and you know, also symbolized by the ram, the lamb, just really masculine, fiery things. But anyways, this is the next potential date, perhaps, if we can believe that this is going to happen exactly as Nostradamus says, or, you know, within our lifetimes, you know, sometime soon. But this is it right here, 2026. As far as a potential comet passing that's of any notoriety, I'm not sure, and I haven't looked into that. But I do know there is a very huge comet passing. It's going to make two passes, but the first one is going to be in 2029, which in my opinion would obviously kind of throw this date off if it were to be linked to that comet. But the comet's called Apophis, and in around April 13th, is it April 30th? It is April 13th of 2029. This comet will come 19,000 miles close to Earth, which it's actually going to pass in between the Earth and the Moon. Now, if you can picture how far the Moon is a 250,000 miles away, 250,000 miles. Now, this comet's going to fly by just a little over 19,000 miles, which is going to be very close, and we should be able to see it from the East Coast. But it will fly back by again, and that's what I want to give for our third potential date here, which might have more significance than all these other dates. Okay, as for our next date is July of 2036, when Saturn and Mars are equally fiery again, both meeting up 10 years later from our last date in 19 degrees of Leo. Here we have Mars and Saturn again being equally fiery. A couple things about this date that are significant, I think more significant than the others. Perhaps not. I mean, this is just speculation on my behalf of the astrological knowledge that's been given, which is very little. But it does say before you know, the great event, before Mabus dies, or, you know, the war of the Third Antichrist, that the comet will pass. And like I said, Apophis will pass the first time in the year 2029 in the month of April. But Saturn and Mars are not going to be in an equally fiery sign. Now, the first time it comes around in 2029, it'll be a little over 19,000 miles close to the Earth, which is very close. And by the present trajectories, they're expecting it to be even farther around for the second pass, which amazingly comes exactly 7 years later on April 13th of 2036. Now, that being a couple months before our date here of July 2036. So maybe this could possibly be a sign of the comet passing, you know, before the war of the Third Antichrist, or before Mabus dies and all hell breaking loose. But I don't know. That's just my speculation. You decide for yourself. Well, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.